Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News, or our monthly crypto mining update with our friend Will from Mining Store. How are you today, Will?
Yeah, really good. We're in an exciting market at the moment, aren't we? So everyone's happy and having a bit of fun. So good to come back on here, mate.
Absolutely, yeah. Alts are all moving, which is always good for the miners that are trying to pick and choose those winners. And you've spoken about sort of holding or accumulating alts for when the price runs up. So we'll get into all that today. But you've got some fantastic slides for us as always, and today's is going to be really educational, isn't it?
Yeah, packed with education. Me and Alex having a chat, and we just found some key parts of the Bitcoin blockchain as well as mining that we think everyone should know about by now. So yeah, we'll jump straight into it and obviously cover off a couple of these points. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ethereum and Bitcoin are both pretty congested. We're going to talk about the differences and similarities there. The blocks are full, fees, sidechains, as well as the hardware. So let's get into it. And we've kind of spoken about all this before, but you just want to give an overview of proof of work and proof of stake.
Yeah, exactly. So as you just mentioned, we have spoken about it before, but I think it's really important just to make that distinction. And some people probably still aren't even aware that there are two different ways that blockchains can mainly be supported. So we'll jump in on that one there. So obviously with proof of work, that's where we're referring to the actual mining hardware. We've got very high grade computers, which are running as nodes. And the nodes are obviously responsible for facilitating transactions or network activity on the blockchain. Now, the way that the blockchain is kept secure is because of the very high power costs and the very high hardware costs as well. So, in the classic old case of referring back to the 51% network attack, if you wanted to, control 51% of the Bitcoin network, you're going to be spending millions, if not billions of dollars getting a ridiculous amount of hardware and spending a lot of money on power costs as well to actually control 51% of the network. So that's kind of how they keep the network secure, is by that high entry level and very high power and hardware costs. Now, the positives and negatives of proof of work, I think really surround mining pools. So, I mean, obviously, what we're trying to do in blockchain is keep things decentralized rather than centralized. And what you can tend to happen with mining on the proof of work side of things is you get big mining pools coming together. Think about a whole bunch of mates collecting those raffle tickets at a footy raffle ticket giveaway. They're all on the same table. They pool their tickets together, and then no one else has really a chance of winning. So it's a bit centralized. You got your boys club kind of there. That's one way that I would kind of refer to it. So yeah, there's obviously positives and negatives there, but that's what we kind of have for proof of work. Do you want to comment on anything for proof of work, Alex, before we jump on proof of stake?
Yeah, I'd probably just say that it's so far there's a couple of things that have centralized it specifically to China that people talk about. So we had the cost of chip manufacturing and just the technology, so they were really ahead of the game, as well as the low power costs. So it was the two big inputs that was kind of the reason that China has all the mining, and a lot of people that aren't in China that are mining, they end up joining the Chinese pools, as you say, to join the syndicates and get the rewards. But that's kind of almost peaked out in terms of the technology, whereas more and more people are getting into chip manufacturing. You've heard everyone talk about and seen in the news that the oil and gas industries in America are starting to work with the crypto mines to use their surplus energy. So that it's really becoming a globally competitive geopolitical industry. I keep saying that in my videos, but yeah, I think that's probably a good summary.
Yeah, no, it's good. And I mean, obviously, those things are natural to happen in the first 10 years of technology. There's going to be early adopters. There's going to be people who have competitive advantages like China with their lower power costs and labor costs as well. That's why we get that centralization. Sure, it still does exist, but yeah, it's good to see that kind of expanding. I know plenty of very large scale mining farms over in Canada, over in Russia, even in Australia. So, yeah, there's definitely evening out now. But moving on from proof of work, the other side of, I suppose, the table, and there's the old age debate of which one's better. I think there's advantages and disadvantages of both. But making the distinction here, the difference between proof of work and proof of stake is obviously with proof of stake, you have a much, much, much lower grade hardware. You're using something like a virtual private server, which might cost you, $5 or $10 a month to run. But where you're showing your commitment to the network and keeping the network secure is by locking up a large amount of coins of that project in that node. So, for example, with Loki, which Alex and I are both fans on, and a lot of people in Australia are, being a Melbourne-based project, you're locking up around about 17,000 Loki on a node, which is run on usually on a virtual private server. And that is kind of your commitment to the blockchain, and in return you receive yields for it. So very similar to a term deposit at a bank, particularly, where you go and lock up $10,000 for 3 to 6 months, and in return you're kind of getting a payout for it. So that's the major distinction there. Is proof of work is very high hardware, proof of stake is very low hardware grade, but you're staking a lot of coins here, and you're committing a lot of kind of power on proof of work.
Yeah, I guess what I'd probably add there is that you've seen different coins and different protocols have played around with this. So some that you don't even need a virtual private server, you can literally do it on a sort of home computer, and that's really where Ethereum want to get to. And when they talk about building things like light clients, they really want people to not have to have this really intensive hardware for the proof of stake. So yeah, that all is different for different coins. Some of them do require you to lock it up for a term deposit, like you said, at the bank. Others you can just join for a day or an epoch. Some of these coins call it different sort of time periods to get different rewards. And some algorithms, I think it's NEM, even rewards you, the longer that you stay on the network, you kind of build importance or priority and trust, and your rewards go up. So there's probably, you could find dozens of different proof of stake or variant algorithms where you can delegate your coins to people like on EOS, and then they actually do the block producing, or everyone can have a go, like Cardano. So yeah, you can read into it and find which of the yields are going to be better for you. Proof of work, yeah, really high. I get an initial outlay of capital expenditure to buy hardware or set up a facility, whereas proof of stake, the outlay is more buying the coins. But again, you don't have to have a lot of money. If you can't afford 32 Ethereum, when they move to proof of stake, there's going to be pools, just like we have mining pools. There's going to be staking pools. You've already seen those with Cardano this week. So yeah, it's all sort of being experimented with. What's going to work the best, we don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I strongly encourage people to, if you want to understand this a little bit more, into just look at different projects that look to be doing similar things. You might look at DigiByte compared to Bitcoin or Litecoin or whatever it is, and just kind of, maybe get involved with the communities and ask the questions of, how is the proof of work on this blockchain different to the other? For example, on the Loki network, they have a decreasing amount of stake that you need to lock up. And there's reasons for this around the tokenomics, but yeah, we won't go into it for too much more detail. But yeah, just get involved with the projects and start asking the questions to understand any more detail.
Okie dokie. So we've kind of gone over this a little bit. Is there anything you want to add, Will, to the different types of hardware?
Main thing I want to get across here is, I think everyone's now familiar, who's been following this channel, of the CPU and GPU, was the early stage or lower grade hardware. And then we've got the FPGA miners, which are higher grade, and then the ASICs. But the main point I actually want to make here is getting people to understand the life cycle that coins on the proof of work network go through, and why early adoption for the coin is GPU and CPU support, and then on to FPGA. So the basic reason for that is, obviously, GPU and CPU is cheaper hardware. It is more than capable of completing basic transactions and advanced transactions. And basically, it's similar to FPGA in the sense that it's reprogrammable. You can play computer games on this hardware. You can design on it. It's very versatile. And so when a new coin comes out and it doesn't require too much hash power, but it needs to have a software built for it quickly, the first kind of hardware that supports those projects is that CPU and GPU. Then what tends to happen is, us FPGA miners, we will kind of look at those projects and go, okay, this is a solid project. Let's develop a bit stream, which is quite expensive to develop and can take 1 to 2 months if you've got a good development team. And then once the FPGA miners come onto the network, we mine it maybe 10, 15 times more efficient than the CPU and GPU miners, and we kind of push them out of the network, and then it becomes FPGA dominated. Now, the final cycle that tends to happen is if the project's really successful, and for example, we've got CKB, which was very successful, and Handshake, which were very successful. What tends to happen is the big ASIC manufacturers go, oh, okay, there's profit to be made there. We will manufacture an ASIC piece of hardware, and they tend to come out and be, 10 times more efficient than the FPGA miners, and that pushes us out. We then go look for a different coin, and then obviously the coin becomes an ASIC mined coin. Now, there are rare cases, like DigiByte, which make their coin ASIC resistant. But I was just telling Alex before, it looks like there might even be some ASICs on the DigiByte algorithm at the moment. So yeah, just a bit of an understanding there of the cycle that coins go through and where each piece of hardware fits in. Hopefully that kind of updates people a little bit more and makes you understand kind of the process that goes through and where each piece of hardware can take advantage of being profitable.
Yeah, so a bitstream is just the software. You've got to write the code to be able to mine a coin. Not everything is just out there for these new coins necessarily. And the other thing I'd say is that whether it's the ASIC producers or even FPGAs, it's kind of all a balance. So you're not just going to outlay all this money to mine a heap of it so you can dump on the community and drive their price into the ground, because then you've gone and spent all this money and now it's sort of gone to waste. So it's this balance, and you kind of see that projects will become maybe part of the mining community, and then they'll try and get on the YouTube channels and the podcasts and the news cycle and marketing, not necessarily shilling, but they've got to try and get the fundamentals out there as well as the mining to support their network and secure the network. So it's all a balance and an equilibrium, like so much in the crypto space.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's different projects that have different kind of goals. Some of them want them to be only CPU and GPU mine because they believe that's the ease of entry. Anyone with a computer at home can turn it on to mine the algorithm, and that's pure decentralization, as opposed to what Alex was talking about. There's been big, farms in China being set up, and you get this centralized control. So yeah, there's obviously advantages, disadvantages of all of them, but at least the viewers now have a bit more of an understanding of where each piece of hardware sits in the proof of work mining industry.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into this block size. And basically, most people are familiar that Bitcoin has a 1 megabyte block size. Recently, 3 years ago, we implemented SegWit, which basically strips out a lot of the data. It segregates the witness data. And what that effectively does is increase the block size or the capacity to 4 megabytes worth of transactions, even though the actual block size is still 1 megabyte. So not everyone has implemented that upgrade. 3 years later, there's still a lot of exchanges that haven't done this. And when you set up a Bitcoin wallet, often it will ask you, do you want legacy or SegWit? And you should always choose SegWit, because that'll make all your transactions cheaper. And if everyone did this, fees would already be a lot lower. But this is great breakdown from Will about sort of what goes in the transaction and the sizes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Alex. It's good to choose that SegWit size, and I think it's important for people to understand what SegWit actually is. It's a name that's thrown around, and probably because of its acronym, people get a bit turned off by it, or what is this? But that is really good information. You're going into a bit more about transactions and block sizes and relating all this back to mining. I'll run through this, and hopefully viewers will have a much better understanding of what actually makes a transaction more expensive, and how it actually relates back to the blockchain. So obviously each transaction is around about 570 bytes of data. And basically, depending on the number of inputs and outputs, that's it. That is what determines the size of your transaction in terms of data. Now, obviously, the bigger that data transaction is, the more expensive it is going to be to put through the blockchain. Now, it doesn't, just to reiterate that, it's nothing to do with sending 50,000 Bitcoin or 1 Bitcoin. It's a lot more to do with the number of inputs and outputs, and we'll go into what those inputs and outputs are. So most transactions require 2 outputs to actually be put onto the blockchain, and that is basically, if I send Alex one Bitcoin, be very generous of me if I did, but if I did send Alex one Bitcoin, there would be a little bit of a fee there, and I might have 1.5 Bitcoin in my wallet, and it needs to send Alex 1 Bitcoin and then send me back the rest of the balance. So that's why there's usually two outputs. It's your change coming back to you. In terms of the number of inputs, a lot of people don't understand, why was there 5 inputs on that transaction, or why was there 10, or why was there only 1? And really it comes to how you receive the coins into your wallet. If you're constantly receiving micro payments because you're, say, a GPU miner on NiceHash, and you're getting 0.001 of a Bitcoin every day, and you're getting maybe 15 of those transactions coming in every day, that's an increase in the number of inputs that are in your wallet. So when you go to send that out, it's going to say, okay, we need to compile all those, and that's, say, 5 inputs, and then sending it out, and you're going to get charged a little bit extra, or quite a bit extra. As you can see, inputs use 148 bytes, so your transaction is going to actually cost more to send out of your wallet. So just to summarize that last bit there, inputs use 148 bytes, outputs only use 34 bytes. And what we see on average is the transaction size totaling to about 570. 570 bytes in 1 megabyte, you can fit about 2,700 to 3,500 transactions in that block. So that just gives people a bit more of an understanding of what this 1 megabyte blockchain means. It refers back to how big these transactions are and how many of them we can fit in the one block. Before I go into this last bit about micropayments, is there anything that you want to add on there, Alex?
Yeah, I'd probably just say, again, some real world examples to dumb it down for people. With the inputs and outputs, Ethereum and other blockchains are different, where we have what we call state. So in Ethereum, it just knows that I have, say, $1,000 in my wallet, and then I want to send Will $100, and it just says 1,000 minus 100. You've now got 900. Whereas Bitcoin, it's a little bit like looking into your wallet and seeing what notes you've got, so what inputs you have. And if I want to pay Will $40, you look in there and you say, well, the $50 note is the sort of the way that I can pay Will. Now, if I have an actual $50 note, I can take that and that's my input, and I've got to broadcast that to the network, and it gives Will $40, and then it gives me back change. Whereas if I have some inputs of 2 $20 notes, or let's say 4 $10 notes, it goes, oh, okay, let's take those 4 inputs, and that's why it actually is more data, because it's 4 inputs rather than 1, but I can give Will the exact amount, and then I have to pay a bit of a fee as well, so it's got to find somewhere another input to pay for that fee, and then I might only have another $100 note there, so unfortunately I've got to give the network that just to pay for a tiny fee to give me back the change. So this is where you see those inputs and outputs when you look at the block explorer. And I guess, that's just an analogy that some people sort of look at all that and they think, geez, what is going on there? Inputs and outputs. Why is my transaction so slow? If you send it from an exchange, you might see, they've got 30 or 40 of those outputs or inputs in one transaction. Like you said before, if you're a miner and it's got to collect 100 little inputs to send out that money to an exchange, that can be a huge amount of really expensive transactions. And you hear things like exchanges are doing a sweep, so they sweep all their wallets and they're trying to consolidate. So instead of having 1,000 or 1,000,000 lots of $1, they want to have $1 million in one input for the next time they have to move coins. So that's just, I guess, a bit of a dumbed down analogy to help people understand that.
No, that was perfect, Alex. I'm going to actually use that myself. That was a very, very good way to explain it, similar to, I suppose, the raffle ticket example that I use for mining pools. I'll be using that one for inputs and outputs. So thanks for that. That was very good. Just to reiterate that last point there in regards to consolidated mining, for those mining store members watching, or anyone that's FPGA mining on the DigiByte blockchain, what you'll probably notice is, the DigiByte blockchain is sending if you're using an Exodus wallet, one DigiByte at a time, which is a minuscule amount. It'll send you 1, then 3, then 6, then 5. And what you can actually use is third-party software called consolidated mining addresses. So if you're a GPU miner out there on NiceHash, you might want to start using something like this. And basically, you're increasing your payment threshold. So you only get paid into your wallet once you've mined a larger amount of coin. Rather than getting those micro 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, you might set it at 500, and that'll be calculated to you getting one payout per day. And that way you're not clogging up your wallet, which will cause issues. And never mind into an exchange as well if you can avoid it. We only do it for TRB, one of the coins that we mine. But if you can avoid it, try not to mine into exchanges. Try and mine directly into wallets there. So just to, I suppose, bring all that information into, like Alex did, a real life example, and actually looking at, what does this mean in terms of dollar values, US dollars, and how much am I paying, and how do I figure out, why I paid so much on a transaction fee. I've just taken some screenshots on the right hand side here of a transaction that was done from an Exodus wallet. And basically, as you can see here on the top right hand corner, you've got 115 Satoshi per byte. That's how much I was being charged per byte. Now, in the bottom left-hand box, you can see that there's the size of that transaction involved one input and two outputs, and the total size was 223 bytes. So if I multiply 223 bytes by the 115 Satoshi, you get $2.82 USD. It was something like 25,000 Satoshi total. So that's a bit of a breakdown of what you can see. If there's a link that I might provide Alex to put in the description even, and it's pretty much where you can go and look at, the average transaction fees over time and the average block sizes and things like that. All the resources are in the one place. It's where I get my screenshots from.
Which site's that, Will?
I'll send it to you. It has gone over my head now, but it's in the next slide. The screenshot there. It's blockchain.com. Sorry, blockchain.com is the website. If you want to head over there, and you can get beautiful charts that kind of show you the average and everything like that. So
I'll just bring it up now because it is one that I've used before, and there's a couple of different ones. As well. But I encourage people to have a look at an Explorer, and I might link the tutorial I did a while ago. But this is where you can come over and see things like the mempool size, the price, transactions, fees. It's got all these cool charts, and you can see your transaction and what's going on. And if you understand all this stuff, then it's peace of mind, and you don't become that beginner that goes to a group and you're like, I sent my coins 8 hours ago, where are they? And you understand that, the blockchain's full, that's why it's taking time. So
in the next slide, we're going to actually look at an exact example of that, Alex, which is good. And I just can't stress enough. It's anyone can engage with Bitcoin and blockchain and the rest of it, but it's when you start really understanding how your transactions are being processed that you can actually gain an upper advantage. I actually use some of this data for my trading. Sometimes you can kind of see, better trace where money's going and volume and what's actually going on. But absolutely, it's just important from a general point of view and for a peace of mind point of view as well. I'll just double check so just to finalize those points there, and then we'll kind of use a real world example. So the average day of fees across blocks mined. So just to break that down, as we know, there's one block every 10 minutes. And if you calculate, that'd be 144 blocks in a day. So on average, we're seeing 50 Bitcoin per day mined in fees, which is around 600,000 US dollars. In terms of average day of block reward, and as we know, we talked about when the halving came around, we went from 13 down to 6.25 in reward. 12.5 down to 6.25 in reward. And so now every day, every block, we're seeing 6.25 Bitcoin that's new supply into the network, which is a total of 900 Bitcoin a day. Now, I've actually calculated this last bit down here a little bit wrong. The fee to block reward ratio would be 50 to 900. Sorry, I've taken the wrong number there. And that would be 1 in 18. So 1 to 18 ratio. Just to break that down a little bit further, what that basically means is in every block that's being mined, 1/18 of the reward going to miners is from the fees that people are paying, as we did in the breakdown above, and the rest of it is actually just coming from new supply. Now, I'll get your opinion on this, Alex. I actually was pretty surprised by that. I reckon that's actually a pretty solid number now, 1 to 18 ratio. Eventually, when the all of the 21 million Bitcoin are out in supply, which is going to be in 100 years time or so, that we're going to only rely on fees, but we're already at a 1 in 18 ratio. I think that's pretty cool, to be honest.
I think that fees, like the network is going to become more of a precious commodity, that block space. And so fees will probably go up and we'll end up only using it for sort of like larger settlements, and hopefully smaller transactions we'll be using on other side chains and other layers as well. So I do think it's a long way off, and the network's going to grow and have more value on it. So I don't really buy into this argument. I'm not worried about the fact that it's not going to be secure because there's not enough fees just yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's kind of before I calculated, would have thought that the amount of fees that are contributing to miners, from a miner's perspective, would have been less than 1/18th. But nevertheless, that's it's a cool number, and it'd be interesting to see what happens going down the track. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen in 15 years, 20 years, because of exactly what you just mentioned, side chain solutions and everything. It's never going to be the exact same, but nevertheless, we can only go on what we know now. Um, the next slide there is basically, I just want to, break down these fees a little bit more, and who's actually setting them, and can you even control them? And the answer is yes, you actually can control your fees. So fees are basically, they can be set by advanced users. Most people will be using software or exchanges, which will dynamically set them based on the network activity at the time. Traditionally, fees were actually set at 0.0001, which was around one US dollar. But yeah, fees can basically change depending on the network activity. And so, as we know, one block can fit, say, let's keep things simple, 1 megabyte of data, which is around 2,700 to 3,500 transactions. But if Bitcoin starts flying through the roof like it just did recently, and it's pushing to 10,000, 11,000, and it's getting all the attention of people around the world, and everyone's trying to transfer onto their wallet or out of their wallet, obviously there can only be 2,700 to 3,000, just to keep things simple, transactions being sent per block. And so people who want their transactions to be sent quickly, they may push up the amount they're willing to pay in fees. And that's where in this right hand chart, you can actually see that, just recently on the 29th of July, happens to be my birthday, the $174, 174 BTC was the total amount that was paid in fees on that day. The average is around 50. So yeah, that was obviously because there was such a high amount of volume of transaction. People were willing to pay more to get those Bitcoin to be moved quicker. And yeah, that's a really good example right there of kind of network congestion. Alex is going to go into some sidechain solutions, which may be able to help with this down the track. But yeah, that's I think this slide just ties things together a bit more. Anything that you want to comment there, Alex?
Yeah, no, maybe everyone was sending you some Bitcoin for your birthday, Will. But I'd probably say, yeah, back in the day, you could actually send Bitcoin for free. So because there was not many people and the miners would get the block reward, there was no need to actually pay them a fee. They would just automatically include all the transactions in the network. Whereas, yeah, it's obviously pretty high. For microtransactions, we don't want people to have to pay $1 or even a few dollars at the moment on Ethereum to execute a smart contract, which might be... so I want people to understand that sending Ethereum to Ethereum address is a very basic transaction. And then if you send an ERC20 token, that's a little bit more complex, so more data. And then if you send like a non-fungible gaming token, that's more again. And then if you execute a smart contract, that's hard, that's more work for the computers to do again. So you're paying more and more in gas. Now, when you go over to an exchange or a DEX, like 1inch is a good example, or when you use something on the DeFi world, it's got to execute that smart contract, and that can be a number of transactions. And that's why these things are costing $10 or $20 at the moment, because they're doing a lot of work basically. So we've seen things like, you keep hearing me talk about, I've got my Go hoodie on. So they're doing Plasma, which is blockchains within blockchains, where the sidechain that can have its own sort of set of rules and can be running on proof of stake. Raiden is like the Ethereum Lightning Network. Schnorr and Taproot, Dandelion. We've got a number of upgrades on Bitcoin, which are like SegWit. We're just hoping that these things can make it, let's say they're only the same as SegWit, where they all make it 4 times more efficient. Well, if you multiply that, you got 4 times 4, 16, times 4, 64, times 4, 256. You say, well, hold on, we've only done 4 upgrades, but all of a sudden we can fit 256 more transactions in a Bitcoin block. And that's why we are trying to make it more efficient rather than just going, let's just increase the block size, because that's what Bitcoin has done recently. But I know you've got here that even Vitalik has expressed his concerns. So the concerns are basically, if you do what Bitcoin Cash has done, or Bitcoin SV is probably a better example, where they've just gone for huge blocks, we're talking gigabytes, and eventually they want to have like a terabyte block, then you need super high speed internet. So basic smartphones can't have these terabyte connections, and they don't have a big hard drive strapped to your mobile phone to download a terabyte every 10 minutes. So you can't keep a blockchain and run a full node. And what ends up happening is that centralizes it to the point where only data centers can basically run nodes, and you might have 50 around the world, and that is basically almost just like, well, why would we even bother? That's just the banking system, or worse, where the government can issue 50 letters, or they can rock up to the office of that data center and say, hey, shut this network down, reverse this transaction, freeze this account. And that's not what we want. We want 10,000 people around the world, like my computer, being able to download the blockchain. Now, as internet gets better, we probably can increase it to 2 megabyte blocks if we really have to. But we're not in a rush. People want the price to go up, and people get frustrated when the network's full. But there's $200-300 billion of value in the Bitcoin blockchain, and we don't want to rush things and do an upgrade and then find out that's got a bug. So we're taking our time. The developers are taking their time. Other than that, just on this slide that you've got here, Will, Ethereum uses gas as the unit rather than just measuring it in sort of satoshis for Bitcoin fees. So it's a little bit more complicated, but it's, you don't really have to understand anything more than when it's busier, you pay more fractions of Ethereum. In mid-June, they increased that block limit. So that's a little bit like increasing the block size, like we spoke about. We did cover this yesterday in our Ethereum monthly update as well. They did it again in July, increasing it a little bit more, but they're hesitant. They don't just want to go from 10 million to 20 million, like we said, and double the block size, because they might see a lot of nodes drop off the network, and that's not what we want. So this is all in response to that increased network activity, which is great. Everyone's using these DEXs all of a sudden, and Ethereum's becoming really popular, but it doesn't really change the number of transactions per second that Ethereum can do. The reason we have to expand it is because of, like I said, it's the more ERC20s, more contracts, more complicated things happening on Ethereum that are increasing the amount of data. So anything to add to all that, Will?
No, I think really good summary there. It's more of your area of expertise, Alex. So probably thank you for going over all that stuff for us. The only thing that I'll kind of add there, I guess, is on that last slide with the Ethereum network that, in mid-June, there was obviously that increase in gas limit per block from 10 million to 12 million. And then in mid-July, as you told me this morning, Alex, it increased from 12 to 12.5. And, I think the summary of what you said there, relating it back to mining, is really the concern that, as we are jamming more data and more requirements into one block and trying to really increase that one block, all of the hardware is going to have to be a lot stronger, and the networks. And that's the biggest fear, as you said, that we don't want, this centralization of this really high grade hardware that only some people can tap into. We'd want to keep things kind of even across the board and have that ease of entry, so that we can keep it decentralized and people can really contribute to the network, just with a basic computer or even their phone in some cases. So now that's probably the only thing that I would add on there. Go ahead.
Just the last point we haven't quite touched on. So Ethereum, when we have two people find a block at the same time, so you might have two miners on the different sides of the world that both find a block at the same time. And in Bitcoin, we might call these, orphan blocks, because they find it, they propagate it to the network, and all the computers, all the nodes talk to each other. And then they say, well, hold on, there's one in Australia and one over here in the US. Which one was first? And on Bitcoin, the rule becomes, well, whoever finds the next block becomes the longest chain, or the most accumulated proof of work. And that's kind of the rule. Ethereum is slightly different, and they call their blocks uncles. And if we increase the block size, like we're just talking about, all of a sudden everyone's trying to download this terabyte block, and it can be really hard work. By the time you download the terabyte over there on the other side of the world, you find out that, oh geez, that's not the right one, and all of a sudden you end up with lots of uncled blocks. That's what they call it, and that's why they don't like to have a high uncle rate, because we don't want everyone constantly confused. It might take, let's say, a minute for a block on Ethereum when it's busy. We don't want people taking 50 seconds just to work out which one's right, and all of a sudden you've got all these different uncles and no one knows what's the real blockchain, and that's when things can get really messy quickly.
Exactly right. Messy and inefficient. There's no point in producing the same thing twice, as anyone would agree with. So, really, really good point there. Obviously there's some really smart people behind all this, Vitalik himself and more. So, it's just about making sure that we, as you said, Alex, don't rush things. Make sure that we do things within means, and it'd be really interesting to see the development of these sidechain solutions as we kind of go on with time. The only point that I would probably want to make before we maybe I might even show one chart of the DigiByte chart. You mentioned you wanted to have a look at some of the altcoins or some of the mine coins. But the only point, and just on slide 6 there, Alex, on the bottom right hand graph that just below the total transaction fees, we've got cost per transaction. I thought it was quite interesting actually that, and again, everyone head over to blockchain.com and go through the list of different graphs that they have and try to understand them, and you really will understand things a lot more. But it's interesting here that the cost per transaction is actually on average, can be between $30 to $50. And the reason for that is you are not paying that much on the fee, but there is, new supply coming from, that 6.25 every block. So that's 6.25 Bitcoin coming in every block, which is, technically a cost. It's inflation or whatever it is, much less than what's going on with the feds and everything else at the moment. But yeah, interesting to kind of track that, at cost per transaction and see what happens in 2-3 years time, or after the next halving, and see if that cost per transaction is coming down or sidechain solutions come on to reduce it. So interesting stuff there. That's probably it for the slides there, Alex. Did you want me to go through maybe just the DigiByte chart that I'm looking at the moment? I think there's a bit of an interesting play going on, and maybe the TRB one if you're interested, or
yeah, just quickly, I'll bring it up on my end as well. What did you want to show people on DigiByte?
So just with the DigiByte BTC pair, if you're having a look there, so it does look like we're kind of coming into a bit of that ascending wedge. We tried to, are we on that at the moment? So I can't see.
Yeah, on a daily chart. Is that what you want to see?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, exactly right. Can you see the ascending wedge that it's pretty.
Hold on, I'll get off Binance because they've only just added it. That's no good to everyone. I'll get on Bittrex. Okay, there we go. Yes, we've got a big ascending wedge. Beautiful.
Beautiful. So yeah, obviously I think around, let me just get the exactly right, on the 25th of July, we obviously tried to break out the top there again. Didn't look like it was going to do it, but we landed right on the bottom of the ascending wedge, and we're starting to come back up, coming to the absolute pointy end of this. I do think that DigiByte could actually make quite a big move here, guys. It's up. Usually when we break out the top of the ascending wedge, we kind of break out the same amount that it took to get to the top of it, which could take us, quite a leg higher. So for those traders out there, might be something to put in the arsenal and have a look at. And then also for those miners out there, might be worth potentially holding on to those coins, waiting for this breakout. And then we'll definitely be taking some of our position off at the top of that breakout. So that's the what I want to cover for DigiByte there. I quite like DigiByte, Alex, as a project. It's very decentralized. I think I saw a tweet by them not long ago that there's about 6 times as many unique miners on the DigiByte network as there is Bitcoin, and that's relating back to that kind of issue with centralization on Bitcoin and these big farms. So yeah, I really like DigiByte, massive community behind it, and if it has this pump out the top of this ascending wedge, I think it's well deserved.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed that one. If you want another educational one, or you've got ideas, please let us know in the comments below. This really is your episode, the community's, as much as it is ours. The links to follow Will and the guys, and our website and our resources, if you're learning more about mining, head over there. And we'll catch up again next month, and hopefully alts have continued to trend higher, Will.
Absolutely. I thought you were going to say my birthday address is in the link below there, Alex.
We might put a donation address for Will's birthday, but it looks like you got enough already from that those transaction fees.
All right, guys, take care. Thanks heaps, Alex, and
Thanks,
all the best.
See ya.